Well, everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the Google Pixel 3 XL and see how this particular phone holds up in 2025. Now, in almost every single way I can imagine, this type of device for the most part, it's probably not the first phone I'd recommend buying. There's significantly way better types of devices that I would personally recommend buying this year than this type of phone. So that's kind of the best way I can explain it. But there are some other devices and some other things out there that might be better than this one. So we'll take a look at it throughout this whole entire video. But if you do want to go through and pick up some devices that I would personally recommend buying this year, links will be down in the description below. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the exact same time. Now, starting off with the outside of these particular devices. With the Pixel 3 XL, this one originally came out back in 2018, and this was a very kind of like, it was like such a controversial type of device when it originally came out. And it was something that when you actually kind of take a look at it, it is a very interesting type of layout because, in a lot of ways, it's like, there's probably some other better types of devices to go and buy rather than this one. But at that time, this was Google's main flagship. And they really did an interesting job with this type of device when it kind of came down to it. Now, when you take a look at this type of device, the best thing to kind of think about here is that when you are kind of going through and looking at this phone, this thing was giving you a pretty big 6.3-inch P OLED display. It was 1440p, and for a lot of people out there, this type of panel and this type of layout would actually still look pretty good for the most part. I do think if you are going to go through and pick up some sort of a device, it is actually pretty nice to be able to go through and pick up some sort of a device like this. Again, it's not necessarily perfect, but it still is going to be giving you a good looking panel, but it's like everything surrounding the panel that just was not that nice at all. It was giving you this massive notch at the very top, which just did not look good at all. And then it was giving you this bezel at the bottom too. So you start to think what was even the point of even having this type of bezel here, and just even the capability behind this type of device. It just doesn't really make a lot of sense to go through and buy something like this type of device when it came down to it, right? Genuinely, when I look at this type of phone, I'm just what was even the point of having this type of device from that particular situation? So personally for me, I feel like this type of device in a lot of ways was just very weird. And even though it was a good looking phone, you start to kind of think to yourself, you feel Google could have done a better job within this type of device when it came down to it at that point. So, but again, it isn't necessarily the biggest deal in the world, but it is just one of those things that you're going to definitely run into here when you're going to go through and pick up one of these types of devices. So from that side too, that kind of covers it up there. The rest of the phone doesn't really feel super cheap. It still feels like a pretty decent expensive phone, luckily. So it doesn't really feel like the cheapest phone of all time. So I definitely do think that right there is actually kind of a nice thing to be able to go through and pick up a device that isn't necessarily going to be an end all be all, or it's not going to be a terrible performing device, but there's definitely going to be better performing devices than this one in terms of the exterior. You're getting this kind of glass aluminum back a little bit, single camera setup in the top, and you're going to have to remember when you go through and buy a phone like this, one of the biggest capabilities of this phone at the time was the camera, and you could say that Google kind of flopped a little bit with this camera when it came down to it, but that was just another one of those things that just ended up happening there too. So beyond that, that's kind of the big thing to kind of keep in mind here within this particular phone on the exterior. But there's a lot of things this phone is missing out on nowadays that a lot of phones have. Things like a higher refresh rate panel, things like a higher brightness type of panel, lots and lots of things like that we are essentially missing out on here that we are no longer getting, inside of the Pixel 3 XL. So from that side, that kind of covers it up there. Now, on top of that, another very big thing to keep in mind here too is that with the Google Pixel 3 XL, this type of phone is also, the camera on the backside is very kind of average. So this phone is going to be giving you a single 12.2 megapixel wide angle camera on the backside and then a dual 8 megapixel camera on the front side. So this is going to be one of the main issues you're going to be running into here again. So going through and buying this type of device, like I stated, it's just going to be a very lackluster type of camera. 4K at 30 on the back and 1080p at 30 on the front. This type of camera, for even a 2018 camera, just really isn't even that great. You would imagine that, Google could have done a better job within this type of lens. Nowadays, they've really caught up and they've done a much better job, but it was a very weird thing that they kind of did this type of they just kind of threw a random camera on here, or it wasn't even that big of an improvement coming from the predecessor. It was cool that it kind of had like a dual camera setup on the front. Like that was definitely unique, and you don't really see that too often in a lot of different devices. But it was still such a weird thing for them to kind of do that here on this type of device. And you would think that for the most part, they could give us maybe like a little bit of a better improvement. But although it's not the biggest deal in the world, it is just, again, one of those other types of minor things that you might run into there. And, I definitely do think if you're going to go through and pick up a phone, this type of camera is probably going to be more or less kind of average when it kind of comes down to it from that side. So from that side too, that kind of covers it up there as well. Now, on top of that, another important thing to keep in mind here is the software longevity. And the thing you're going to have to remember here is that this type of device is basically already done getting software updates. So this phone is no longer getting pretty much any more software updates anymore. And if you're trying to get a device that is going to be giving you software updates, this one is basically done. So that right there, again, is kind of a disadvantage for this type of device. Because once again, if you were wanting a phone that was going to be giving you a little bit of a longer lifespan, unfortunately, this type of device is already going to be kind of stuck in the situation where it's not really going to be giving you any more software updates. So although it's not the biggest deal in the world, it is definitely going to be one of those types of issues that you're going to run into from that particular side. So definitely when it comes down to that type of device, that is kind of one of those big things to keep in mind there for the most part too. But again, it's not the biggest deal in the world, but it is going to be one of those small things you're going to run into there. When it kind of comes down to the performance, this type of device is giving you that Qualcomm Snapdragon 845 chipset inside, and it's going to be giving you 4 gigabytes of RAM. So from this side too, this is also going to be another one of those types of problems, right? Because you're going to go through and pick up a device like this, but it is going to be one of those types of phones that you're going to basically pick up, and it's going to be a little outdated a little bit by the time you go through and pick up this type of device, because there's definitely going to be better performing devices rather than this one when it comes down to it as well. And this type of phone, even for a 2018 phone, I guess it's good, but it's pretty much in line with something like other 2018 phones like a Galaxy S9 and those types of devices. So I do think this type of device does do like a decent job at that. But like I said, there's definitely some other better types of, phones out there that will definitely give you an overall better type of improvement. So with this type of phone, I feel like it's good and it gets the job done. But there's definitely some other better ones out there that I would highly recommend buying, probably more so than this thing when it kind of comes down to it. So what I think is basically this type of phone probably isn't really worth buying in the capacity pretty much anymore. I think there's significantly better types of devices to go ahead and pick up. And I feel like with this type of device, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense to go through and pretty much buy it anymore. And I feel like there are kind of better devices out there to go ahead and pick up rather than this one. So I feel like if you're going to go through and pick up this type of device, it's still good and it still gets the job done. But I do think, like I mentioned, there's just some better options out there. And I feel like it makes a lot more sense to go through and pick up maybe like a Google Pixel 7 or a Galaxy S23. Those types of devices I'd probably recommend picking up more so rather than this one. So in terms of that, that's kind of the best way that I can kind of describe it for the most part. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.